So hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Southcast for this season with myself, Glyn Price, and I'm joined with Ollie Warner in the midweek, which is a bit unusual, Ollie. So yeah, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate.
Good. And we've got 3 other guests with us this week, Ollie, to talk predictions and thoughts really about the season coming up. So yeah, we've got a few people who were on the podcast quite recently, actually, when we did the end of season things about COVID at the end of last year. So yeah, welcome back, Dan Hoff. How are you, mate?
I'm very good. Cheers, Glyn. Very good.
Good. And Chris Hudson, welcome back on, Chris.
Thanks very much, Glyn. Raring to go.
Good. And as usual, my brother, Mike Price, just had his tea, settling down to talk football. How are you, Mike?
I've got a bit of indigestion, but I'm all right.
That's good. And as we said, Ollie, we're here to talk about what we think might happen this season and put some markers in the sand, really, which we can come back to and look at the end of the season and laugh at how incorrect we were. But
actually, were you there, Glyn? Do you remember where you predicted us to finish last season?
I would imagine it was quite low, wasn't it?
I think you said 9th.
Did I?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, this bodes well, doesn't it, for this season? So, yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be quite as brazen this year. But, I think before we get into some of our predictions and how foolish they might be, I suppose it's a case to catch up with some people who might be sort of thinking ahead of back to football or seeing that football's changed after we did the podcast last week with Mike Davis about how that situation is going to be. We've not really had a chance to chat, Ollie. So, I don't know, where are you at, really? You excited about going back to the football? You okay with everything that might be happening there? Where are you at with it, really?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to football. It should be really good. Yeah, looking forward to going to the ground and looking forward to seeing some live football. I was chatting to my wife earlier. She's chatting to me about one of her friends at work who's a Villa fan, and they've got to do a lot. And all those fans, and particularly remember Wolves fans, taking the piss out of us of being a small team. But at least we can all fit in our stadium, so there are some silver linings.
and Dan, probably start with you first, because I think the four of us, not me, you're obviously an Exile fan, and probably going to be the most difficult for you to kind of get a ticket. I'm not sure if you've got a season ticket, but different scenario for our Exile fans, isn't it, really, especially living as far away as you do?
Yeah, it is a different scenario. I've got a season ticket, so
I've got
little doubt that I'll get one if I can. But
good.
I've not really felt that the season's got anywhere near starting yet. I mean, I often feel that in pre-season, and I didn't really enjoy the football at the end of last season as much as I thought I would. A mate of mine said that was football for people to go to JJB Sports, buy a T-shirt and watch their team on the telly. And of course we don't do that. We watch our team in the stadium, and I still feel I'm quite a long way from that, even though, as Ollie just said, it's just around the corner. Should be able to get to see the town quite quickly. But until I actually get into the ground, I think it's always going to feel like it's quite a long way away. So bring it on, basically.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah, bring it on. I feel like that. And what about you, Chris? Obviously, you work in the profession, the medical profession, and it was really good to have you on when we talked about the COVID situation when it first started and some of the insights you gave. But how are you feeling really about the risks entailed with potentially going to football from your sort of standpoint, really, where you work, I suppose?
I'm just anxious to get back, to be honest, Glyn. I think that the safety measures that the club have talked about are perfectly reasonable, and I'm happy to follow those measures. And the earliest they'll let me into that stadium, I'll be there. I'm praying for September the 19th. I'm looking at that.
Yeah.
I'm praying that season ticket holders will be in the ground for that game. And if they are, I'll be one of them. You can count on that.
Cool. Well, yeah, we won't be quite so close, I suspect, as we used to be, Chris. Obviously, you sit just behind us. But in terms of people being split up, it's interesting because obviously I've talked about it on the podcast a lot. Me and my brother sit next to each other since we moved to the new stadium and stood by each other at the Riverside. And it's going to be interesting, Mike, in that the rules with family bubbles is that even we can't sit together, which seems very odd. But it's going to be probably a nice relief for you to get away from me for a few weeks at least.
I was going to say, it'd be a nice bit of peace and quiet in the one-man bubble. I don't know how many empty seats have got to be around me, but it's going to be, it's going to be nice and quiet. Probably get a little nap in half time, but it's an odd thing to think about, really, because the large part of going to the football for me is the social scene and going to the pub before the match or going to the fan zone and half the time, 90% of the point of the enjoyment of football is the banter you have on the terraces. Because, like Dan said, the football last season was pretty gross, So the idea of sitting there and having to actually concentrate on that football and find something to pick out of it, if it's not very good, it leaves me a bit cold. But I'm sure I'll find something to moan about and some people to moan with wherever I end up in the stadium. It'll be fine.
We'll get through. I'm sure you'll survive without my inane babbling throughout the match every week, Mike. So that's something to look forward to. But Ollie, you've been sort of talking, you were keen to do this predictions podcast. And you've been doing a fair bit of research, which is good, about League One and stuff like that. And I don't know, where do you want to start this predictions pod or really with?
Yeah, I think it's maybe worth to start. And as we always get this time of the year, you get betting companies, magazines, and it's like almost like a new genre, isn't there, in terms of fan media? And then there's also specialists that kind of focus on the non-league, on league football. Most of those guys have us sitting between 18th to 23rd. So
great,
pretty poor. Interesting talking to a guy a couple of weeks ago. There was a guy who did a prediction, which you had some chat with Glyn on Twitter, where he thinks basically our XG number and our goals was kind of pulling us down. But then there's also a really interesting insight from a guy called Matt, who does Jill's in the Blood podcast, the Gillingham YouTube channel, and his view is all based on, obviously, as you do have as a League One fan, it's basically the games that you see. And he saw us the game after we played Liverpool, and we were pretty awful away at Gillingham on a Tuesday night. Yeah,
we were beyond dismal that night. You can't possibly judge us on that, please.
Yeah. No, but that's his view, isn't it? And that's based on what he's seen. And he said that we were probably just a bit better than Bolton's kids, and probably the worst team he saw all season. And it's interesting that Sam Ricketts even mentioned that game when we met him, in terms of a match that shows that we couldn't go from different styles. We really struggled to kind of adapt. We had Liverpool and their passing style one game. The next game we had Gillingham, who are a tough team, tough to play against, play direct football, and we really, really struggled. And I think it's really interesting that a lot of these predictions and a lot of the comments either obviously have a legacy of last season, but also a lot of them have Sam Ricketts at the kind of centre. And there's some questions about the manager. So I think that's where we should start. So he's in his third season, but obviously he didn't do a full season in the first one. His win percentage is not very good, unfortunately. So he's managed 78 games, and he's only won 29.5% of them. So a 30% win ratio. When he was at Wrexham, he did have 56, so maybe that's why we signed him. But I'd be interested to throw it to you guys. Maybe I'll start with you, Chris. Where does Sam Ricketts kind of sit in kind of your expectations? Is he 10 games away from the sack, or you've got full confidence he'll be here at the end of the season?
I think he's got more than 10 games. I think whatever we feel about frustrations of style of football last season, we finished 15th and a fairly comfortable 15th. And right up until Christmas time, we were even dallying with the playoffs at that point. So I think the guy's probably got a bit more in the locker than he's been given credit for. And he's talked about changing our style this season. So I think you've got to give him more than 10 games to see how that's going. Now, obviously, if after 10 games we've drawn 2 and lost 8 or something, I'll come and say something very different to you. But equally, if after 10 games, we've won 3, drawn 3, lost 4 or whatever, I don't think that's going to get him sacked. I think he's probably going to be riding fine until at least Christmas, January, and then see how we're going at that point. But I think Sam Ricketts needs a bit of time he's brought in good players, hasn't he? You look at the squad that he's brought in and a number of those signings, you look at the defenders he's brought in, the midfielders, you look at the likes of Daniel Ludo, Jason Cummings, and you think to yourself, actually, there's some quality that he's brought to our football club. So you've got to give those players a bit of time to shine, and maybe this season's the season you'll get the best out of them. Probably last year he'd admit himself that he didn't maybe get the best out of all of those players.
What would you say, Mike?
I think he's going to live or die on whatever happens in the rest of the transfer window. I think the squad on paper looks pretty thin to me still. I think there's still some huge gaps in personnel that we need. And until he finishes recruitment, you can't really say how you think he's going to do, because if he goes into a large part of this season with the current squad, we're going to struggle. I think we are, just in terms of numbers of players and the physicality of the league and that. If he can add another centre mid, a good energetic left back, another quality striker, maybe another option out wide, it's a completely different kettle of fish. If he can get some good recruitments in, he's got more than enough time to bed him in and get him playing. But again, it's late in the window. There's obviously special circumstances here, but it's not ideal. Our first game's on Friday, and you're looking at the squad and thinking, we need maybe 2 or 3 more here.
Yeah, where would you say, Dan, what would you say in terms of expectations on the manager? Are you confident he's the right man at the moment?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that occur to me there, and that they link in from what Mike said a bit. The first one is that obviously there's still 46 league games, but if you look at the time that we're going to be playing those games, there's more weeks where we have 2 games a week, a lot more weeks actually. And if we have cup runs, including the Mickey Mouse sort of EFL Cup, all that sort of stuff, it's going to be a lot of football, and our squad is a bit threadbare, and that concerns me, but only so far, because a lot of the loan deals that are done are done very last minute. And we've done that in previous years, and other clubs do it as well. And there's an awful lot of players at the moment who I think are out of contract and are willing to move. So I'm not massively concerned, but he's got to get it right. If we don't get a couple more players in, we will just, numbers-wise, I think, be struggling a bit. The other thing is, I mean, I see where Ricketts is going with all of this. He wanted to make us hard to beat last year, and it made us pretty dull, but he did make us hard to beat. That defence was all right, you know, and for parts of the season, it was better than all right. So I like that, and I think we've got a base on which to build. And he set his store out now, isn't he? And he did so on the podcast last time round. He wants to change the brand, and he wants to be able to play slightly different ways, depending on, you know, what is necessary. And the Gillingham-Liverpool compromise situation is exactly what I think he's trying to address. So I think he's talked a decent game there. And I think there's plenty of reason to give him some slack and see if the positive football materialises alongside a defence that looks at least as competent as it was last year. So glass half full, to be honest. I'm intrigued to see where we are at Christmas, but like Chris, I won't be calling for his head unless we have a truly cataclysmic, you know, lost 9 of the first 10 type of start.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Dan. I think it's got to be cataclysmic that start of that season for anything to be, you know, worrying about changing manager straight away, particularly in the environment we're in and the situation football clubs find themselves in. It's probably a cost that this football club can't really afford at this moment, to be sacking managers and a whole load of backroom staff. So in reality, for us to hound a manager out for anything less than an exceptionally poor bit of form would probably be hampering ourselves more than anything. I do agree, you know, with a lot of what the guys have said there, really. And I think it's a case of having sat and looked him in the eye, Ollie. Obviously, we got the chance to do that and really kind of felt what he was saying. And I think it came across on the podcast. Definitely is going to be a more attacking team. He's proved that the first season, he stabilised us and kept us up. Second season, sorted the defence out and took us on a good cut run. Now, I need to start to see how that attacking transition moves in this team, and how we get to a period where we can score more goals, still stay defensively solid. And if you can produce that one in every 2 or 3 games through to Christmas time and we'll be fairly safe, I think that he's going to be probably in this job to the end of the year. I think if we finished 15th or 16th still this season, he probably isn't going to get sacked, and there won't be too much of a clamour for it because of the situation we're in, really. So it is an interesting one because he's certainly had a roller coaster, 3 seasons with us in terms of what's happened. So yeah, like everybody, I suppose we just want to see what's going to evolve.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's interesting that the same people who are now predicting us 19th were also predicting us to kind of get in the playoffs around that Blackpool time and then last season. And it was a very interesting season. And yeah, obviously a young manager who's learning. I'd be interested to see how he can perform. And I'm sure he said to us quite clearly he wanted to do better. So looking at the league table, did do a bit of a poll among Shrewsbury Town fans to try to get a sense of where they think. I did a poll on Twitter and Facebook, and I've combined them. I think it's fair to say 50% of Shrewsbury Town's fan base think we're going to finish mid-table, 30% flirt with relegation, 20% in the playoffs, and less than 4% think we're going to go down. So not many. So where would you kind of pit? So maybe start with Dan. Where do you think we're going to finish this season? What's your kind of I guess obviously we all hope to go up, but what's your kind of like your kind of realistic expectation?
Yeah, if you haven't got positive expectations on day one, then you might as well give up, right? We all hope and dream that something's going to, we could have another Paul Hurst season. Who knows? I mean, we did do it once. But when you asked me about this originally, I did put a number. I put 17th. Now, I think we're a lower half of League One club. When we're in League Two, or when we were in years gone by, I always feel we should be going up. When we're in the Championship, and I'm old enough to remember the 10 years that we had in the Championship, clearly I always felt, anything above a relegation place is a fantastic success, even when we were in the top half. So for me, we're sort of where we naturally should be, which is the lower half of League One. And I think we'll have good runs. I think we'll have good spells. I think we might score the odd goal, people like Cummings around. But I think in the great scheme of things, being realistic, looking at budgets, looking at some of the clubs that are in our division, I'm thinking we're going to be above the relegation zone, I hope, but probably not by a million miles.
What about you, Chris? Where are you going to mark your line in the sand for this one?
I'm largely where Dan comes from. I'm one of those who sees this as a lower bottom half club. 14th, 15th, 16th. That's usually a good Shrewsbury season. I look for momentum. Portsmouth's a tough first game, but if we went down to Fratton Park, got a draw, or God forbid a win, we go there and beat Portsmouth. That's what happened in the Paul Hurst season. I think before the pod started, the comment was made that in the Paul Hurst season, that Northampton game where we scored very late on, and that kind of got the ball rolling. And who knows what would have happened if that didn't. Momentum's a big thing in football. We could have Portsmouth and win, and then suddenly you've got a couple of winnable games after it, and who knows, we could have a great season still. Because I look at our squad and think we have got quality in it. Probably not enough quality to cope with the volume of games we've got coming up. Funnily enough, as long as we play well on Friday, I don't mind too much if we lose, for example, because the way they've set it up this year, the Carabao Cup's a bit ridiculous in that it's every Tuesday for the next 4 or 5 weeks. And actually, if we're knocked out of it on Friday, our players have got a month where they can actually have a bit of an easier start to the season, where they've got a week off in between games. And if we can use that to build a bit of momentum while a few other teams maybe flog themselves in cup games, then who knows? We could find ourselves going into October sitting in the top 6 and use that as momentum for a good season. I guess that's what I'm hoping for. Like Dan says, you have to be optimistic at this time of year. You've got to dream.
Are you going to give us a number then? Come on. Just
Well, when it comes to numbers, I'm a realist, Glyn. 14.
14th. Okay, that's fine. I'm making a note of all this, Gad. So, we'll revisit this. I'm up down Twitter. But I don't know about you, Mike. I sometimes hard to judge where you think. I think you've been quite pessimistic of Ricketts when we've sat and watched some of these games, but we've seen some good stuff as well. I don't know, where are you sitting at the moment with, just as I know everything's not finished, but where are you thinking?
I go sort of back to my previous point, really. I don't think with this, I mean, you look at the recruitment we've made so far, we've brought in 5 players, and I think, is there a handful of any professional football appearances amongst them? I don't think many of them played much first team football. So then you play what was here last season. We got the squad we had last season minus Josh Lauren, arguably one of our better players. And it just feels
Omar Beckles gone.
Yeah, we lost Beckles. I mean, the okay start we made last season was due in part to Ryan Giles down the left wing. We haven't got him this season. We've only got Scott Goldborn back there. You look at that squad compared to where it was last season. I think it looks slightly weaker in terms of first team ready footballers ready to play on day one.
Giles hadn't played any league football before the start.
Well, that is true, Chris. And what you've done is you've shot me down in flames there quite quickly. But I personally, from my point of view, I think we're going to struggle. Where did we finish last season? 15th? I'm going to say 16th.
Yeah, just make a comment about
I think it'll be worse unless we can recruit some players relatively quickly of quality.
I'm going to set you up a little bit there, because I've actually printed out what the team sheet was on the first day of the season last year. And we had Morrison up front, McCormick in midfield, Vincelow in midfield. It was. I would argue whether the squad is that much worse, but I think it's fair to say the late transfer window is definitely going to put us back a bit.
I'm talking more the squad that finished the season, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's the tough part, isn't it? And we'll come on to where areas for improvement a bit later on. But in terms of squad recruitment, it is tougher with this later window. Glyn, what are you going for?
Yeah, I'm not going to say 9th this season, that's for sure.
It was actually 11th. You said I said 9th, actually. You said 11th.
Okay, there you go. I don't know what we were smoking that night, Ollie, but there we go. But yeah, it's not going to be that high this season. My main concern is one of the things that we've seen, which is a repeating pattern under the 2 seasons from Sam Ricketts, which is he hates playing Tuesday, Saturday all the time. It's clear that he doesn't like it. He doesn't get the preparation time. He's complained in both seasons about how it affects fitness and how he can continue to keep lads at a high level. Now, to me, like Dan pointed out right at the start of this, we're going to get Tuesday, Saturday a lot more because of this constrained season. And I do wonder whether we've got the squad numbers to deal with that, regardless of whether we bring a few more in, and whether this time Ricketts can maybe get them fit enough to keep doing that all throughout the season. And we might not go on cup runs like Chris pointed out, so it might help a little bit. But it has been a recurring theme about a kind of disjointed performance between the Saturdays and Tuesdays, and that's then set us back. We've taken one step forward, we've seen it all last season, and then taken 2 steps back the following Tuesday. So I do worry about that a little bit, but I think I'm probably in line with the guys now. What we've had, 17th, 14th, 16th, I think we might slightly outperform next season and finish 15th or 14th or something like that. But I think I'd probably stick with Mike. 16th seems like a number for me. Maybe getting a similar amount of points to what we got this year, but in a slightly different way, probably conceding more and scoring more, maybe having some more entertaining games at the end of the day, but it maybe comes out as still the net same result, really, which to me, I prefer. If we're going to repeat last season, let's do it slightly more entertaining, I suppose.
Yeah, cool. My number's 14th. I think we'll finish 1 place higher, which means we've made progress. But it is difficult to kind of predict. It's such a long season. And so many things can happen. We sign a Ben Godfrey and a player of that caliber. or with a Tyrese Campbell type player, and all of a sudden your squad that you're going, not sure, you're going, but yeah, we've got a few good players now. And I think it's going to be those, as you talk about, Glyn, it's those players on the bench, it's those players in the squad, and having that quality, and I think some also the youth players, which we'll come on to shortly, and then those lads can be able to step up. So yeah, that's brilliant. So yeah, we've covered off kind of our predictions, and now we're going to go to some a bit more kind of, we're going to look at who we think is going to be potentially our player of the season. So a quick spin round, who you think is going to be the man that's going to make the difference for us?
I think that because everyone seems to love him and he's a character, and it just needs a full season where he probably is fully fit and firing all cylinders. We're going to play probably a more attacking formation from everything Ricketts has told us. Might generate more goals. I think it will be Jason Cummings. I think that he might not actually end up having the best season of everybody, but I think that fans will probably end up voting for player of the season, because this football club is desperate for a striker to score more than 15 goals in a season, which I think he's eminently capable of doing. And he probably would nail down player of the season just for that, to be honest with you.
I'm going for a striker, but a different one. Daniel Udo. I think he's quality. I think he's got real potential. But he finished last season strongly, and if he can start this season strongly, I think he is a 15-goal striker if we can give him the chances. He's the kind of player that if he went and signed for Peterborough tomorrow, he'd score 25 goals this year.
Cool. Mike, what do you reckon?
I'm not so confident about our striking options, personally. I'm going to go with the guy that missed a large part of last season and should be raring to hit the ground running and really take this team by the scruff of the neck. I think Ollie Norburn owes us a quality, consistent season. He's good enough to do it. He just needs to keep his fitness, keep his temperament in some occasions, and he's a quality footballer. So I think if he can keep it in the team, then I think he'd be great.
One, I'm going to go for two, but they're based on sort of alternate realities, really. If we have a good season that it sort of goes beyond our expectations, as we discussed today, then I'm going to go for Sean Goss. And the reason I say that is, when I came up to the Bristol City game at the Meadow, I brought a friend of mine with me, just long car journey, good to chat to somebody, and he's a football pervert is the phrase I would use. And he'd seen Sean Goss's name on the sheet, and he said, "Well, it's obviously not the guy who played at United, is it? Because he's going to be a Premier League footballer." And I said, "No, it is the guy who played at United." And he was like, This is just ridiculous. He is going to be a Premier League footballer. And, we don't all get everything right with these things, but he was amazed. And he said, right, you get Sean Goss in the right position. He can pass the ball like nobody else. He'll be able to distribute in a way that nobody in League One will be able to do. You've got to get him in the right team, playing in the right way. I'm not sure holding midfielder is the right position. He needs to be a bit further up the pitch. But if Ricketts can get him running the game in the quarterback role, maybe, then Goss has the ability to be that player. And that player that, I'm thinking about like Rodman, who had a fantastic season in the Hurst year, but I didn't see it the season before. I wasn't sure at all that he was going to be anything other than a journeyman footballer. But so I'm thinking, in a good year, Goss comes to the party and controls games. In a bad year, you've got to look at one of the centre halves to keep us up, and our best player is Aaron Pierre. So I'm going to go Aaron Pierre. Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to go for Josh Vella. I don't know if it's just because I listened to a Bolton podcast and they were talking about how amazing he was. He played in a more of a number 10 position and running off a target man. And they said that he was like one of their best players they had. And Sam Ricketts was really, really enthusiastic about signing him. And, he said he hadn't really planned to sign him in January, but when a player of that quality comes along, for me, potentially that Goss sitting, but with Norborn and Vella next to him, working really hard. A bit like maybe like Paul Hurst did. 1 minute we were playing two defensive, one with Nolan up front, and then we'll spin it around, and then you'd play, a go pushing forward with Nolan. Maybe that three could be quite interesting. So for me, it's good that we've all sort of interesting. We've all mentioned different players, which says there is some quality there. But for me, I'm going to go for Josh Vella.
This was worth noting. That wasn't planned either, was it? We didn't all sit down beforehand and say we're going to get 5 different players.
I hadn't even thought about it, to be honest. It was a spur of the moment decision.
It's funny with Ollie's pick, because when we sat with Ricketts, we did obviously talk to him afterwards, didn't we, Ollie? And finished recording, he had a quick chat with us, and we were talking to him about various little bits and pieces. Some of it we probably couldn't talk about on the podcast time, but you mentioned Vella when you were looking at the squad. He was really high on Vella, wasn't he? That was one of the things that came across to me, and it probably didn't go out on the podcast, but he was really keen on expressing how many roles Vella could play, what he is, and he was. I think he described him as a proper footballer or something like that. It was a phrase like that, wasn't Ollie? So I can kind of see why he's led you down that path. It does seem like he's more exciting than the glimpse of him we got last season.
It was more probably the Bolton lads talking about him because he was on their podcast, and it's interesting as well that he shares a car with Ollie Norburn. And I remember Agogo and Sadler were doing that from Wolverhampton, and maybe they could have that same kind of performance that we saw in that Paul Hurst season. So that was good.
Interesting, yeah. I agree with Dan. It's interesting that we all got different ones. So, go on. What's the next one then on the docket, Ollie?
So, next section, breakthrough young players. So who do we hope is going to come through? And so, who do we have? So, in the squad, training with the first team squad this summer, we have Ryan Sears, who can play either central defence or right back. Cameron Gregory in goal. We've also then got in midfield James Rowland, Charlie Canton, and Ryan Barnett. And it's been a while, hasn't it, Chris, until we've actually had a player come through the youth system.
Yeah, our own homegrown young players. You've got to go back to the era of Connor Goldson, maybe, coming through, Ryan Woods. Those were the last two who've really gone on from starting at Shrewsbury Town to have a solid career. Since then, I can't think of anyone. We've had a few come in for the odd game. Obviously, Ryan Sears has been on the fringe of it. He's had a few games at right back last season. From what we're hearing, the manager sees him as a centre-back, which, if I was Sears, that would ring a few alarm bells, if I'm honest. You see him getting in ahead of Ebanks Landell, ahead of Aaron Pierre. You just don't see many games in the horizon for him. So, yeah, it's a bit of a shame, really. I think we're all crying out for one of our own to really make that breakthrough.
I thought that was quite interesting, Chris, actually, because when you say Connor Goldson, I remember seeing some early games where he played at right back. And I remember thinking, well, not sure about this. He didn't do badly, but I didn't feel Connor Goldson going on to play at the level he's played at. Moved him into centre half, and I thought slowly but surely he became a real player. And the way I looked at it, Ricketts does like to play five at the back. I don't think that's gone out the window totally. So as and when one of our three centre halves gets injured, and they must do, or suspended, then Sears plays. So my go-to choice here was absolutely Sears, because he's made a little bit of progress, but he needs a bit of luck. And I think centre-half is more likely to be the place where he's going to get it. And he could, more by somebody getting injured, get a 10-game run, which, well, I don't want to be too heavy on the guy. He's a young lad, but it could make him or break him. If he does well in that 10-game run, then the world could be his oyster.
Yeah, because what you said about Goldson, do you remember Graham Turner probably agreed with you? He could hardly get a game under Graham Turner. He got loaned out to Cheltenham Town.
I do remember that. Yeah.
It was only when Mickey Mellon came in that suddenly Connor Goldson was the first choice centre-back, and it all took off for him. So you just need that break, don't you? And Ryan Woods started at right back. I'm sure a few of you might remember that. His first games in the first team were at right back before he got the shot in midfield. So you never know, players. And I suppose that's promising. Sears started at right back, so if he goes on to make his name elsewhere, I'd be delighted. Yeah, he's one of our own.
What about you, Mike? Who are you looking at of the sort of younger players that will probably have their breakthrough this season?
Oh, I could just pick a name out of a hat. I don't know anything about any of them, to be honest with you. I read a good bit of a comment by Ricketts about Charlie Caton. Apparently he's all right. We saw James Rowland at Ludlow last year. He had an all right game. He met his dad. He seemed quite nice. But it's fishing about with kids, isn't it? You might hit one or not. How old is Brad Walker? Is he still a kid?
I don't think
But like you say, all you can hope is that one of our own from our youth system goes on and does well. We're still so proud of people like Joe Hart and Connor Goldson and stuff. Having another one of them would be great. The question is, will Joe Hart play for this club again before we have another youth prospect come through? That's kind of the race is on, isn't it?
Oh dear. I'll ask you in a minute, Dan, as well, what yours. I'll kind of say what I think. I mean, yeah, it'd be lovely to think it's one of the lads that's come through our youth system that's going to break through of that younger crop, sub sort of 22, 23. But in reality, to me, the one player that will probably make the breakthrough this season will either be Harry Burgoyne or this new guy whose name I now cannot mention, Sarkic Magia, who signed today, this other keeper from Wolves. In reality, one of them's probably going to nail down a first choice goalkeeper spot, and they'll probably have a reasonable season. They're both 22. One of them's still 21 actually, but it's likely that one of those will be one of our youngest players that gets the most amount of games. Personally, I hope it's Harry Burgoyne because he's a local lad, isn't he? He didn't come to our youth system, but he's from Ludlow, and there's a bit of a local link there. But if it's the lad we've got on loan from Ludlow, from Wolves, it'll probably be just as much of a chance for him to break through as well. Neither of them ever played a football league game so far, so it can be termed a breakthrough because it's going to be their first chance at first team football. So to me, when we're looking at the breakthrough players of the young crop, I think you're looking at either of those keepers, and the battle's on really to see who nails down that number one position.
Yeah, I think Ryan Sears was my initial sentiment there, because I do think we've got those three centre halves, and Ricketts has this penchant for playing three at the back, and something will happen to one of them. So I'll stick with Sears. But thinking about the way the squad's set up, I mean, you got two lads who are potentially going to play on the left, right? Ryan Barnett and Charlie Caton, and you've sort of got Josh Daniels there as well. And I'm thinking, well, we're not sure how that's going to pan out. And there are opportunities there on that side of the pitch if this is the way that Ricketts is thinking. So maybe that's an opportunity for a forward-looking player to make an impact. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I knew which one. And much like Mike, I don't know that much about them other than what I read in the Shropshire Star. So I think I'd stick with Sears, but keep an eye out on the left. There might be opportunities there for someone to come in and make an impact.
Yeah, I think the fact that the window doesn't close until October means that we probably might not sign maybe the first choice left-sided player or one of the wingers for a while. So yeah, hopefully it gives them a starting chance. And yeah, we would love to see youth players come through our team. One, obviously, it's great to see them come through and have a ladder, but also potentially can help you financially as well if you sell a player and he moves on to higher division. But yeah, for me, I think Sears is on the brink of hopefully becoming a first team regular. I think if we're going to play the 4-3-3 attacking right back, it's interesting how right back used to be the kind of the bit of a doormat for kind of putting youth team players in the squad and just throwing them in. I think where right back is so important now, you look at the higher leagues, of how Liverpool play and how important Trent Alexander-Arnold is. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that gets on. Be interested to see how the new lad from Fulham gets on loan. But yeah, for me, Ryan Barnett potentially, he's played more first team games at Telford than Charlie did. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he gets on.
The new lad as well from Fulham brings in magnificent hair.
Yeah,
and has to be said. That's got to count in his favour. So I'm intrigued to see how that pans out to the season.
Finally, a replacement for Junior Brown. Finally,
I said either of the two keepers, whoever nails down the number one spot, really. But we can't judge that, can we, at this point? No. I hoped it was Burgoyne because of my ongoing love for getting a local lad in the team. But we'll leave that for now, Ollie. I'm sure we'll revisit that as the season goes on.
Cool. So we've brushed on it a few times, and Mike has kind of alluded to what he would like to see. Clearly, the squad as it is a bit threadbare and probably short of a bit of quality. So in terms of areas for improvement, rather than everyone do a list of players, maybe we'll go around the table so we can all have a bit of a show. So, if you've got one place to recruit, Dan, let's go with you first. So what position are you thinking we most need to see some improvements? And we'll go on until we finish the squad kind of going through that.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because all of them. There are better players in those positions.
But centre back, we're doing pretty well, I think, for League One level. But I agree. I'll take your point.
Yeah, semi-facetious comment. Sorry, but at the same time, so it depends a little bit what's available. I mean, I assume Ricketts is talking to people. I assume that that the telephones are ringing all the time. Personally, I'm not convinced about our strikers. I'm in the hopeful category. I hope Cummins gets a few goals, but. He has had injuries and he can go a bit loopy. So I mean, I'm not sure I want to rely on that. I thought Dan Uday had a fantastic season last year, but I don't know if that's as good as it's going to get. It may not be. But I won't mind, a seasoned striker up top. Having said that, I got exactly my wish last year with Morrison, and look how that went. So I mean, I'm got to be careful what you wish for, but I'm thinking goals is going to be a real challenge for us. And if we could get someone with seasoned experience, then that would be ideal. But I appreciate these folks don't go on trees.
Will Grigg, you mean then? Yeah, Will Grigg. Okay, agree.
Well, someone like Will Grigg wouldn't be the worst.
Yeah, in that mould, but probably not Will Grigg anymore. But there we go. I'll go next. Sorry. I mean, for me, I still think that this team, when I think about some of the best football we played towards the end of last season, we needed that John Nolan type creative midfielder, and we seem to find one in Conor McAlhaney. Unfortunately, we've missed out on him, I think, now. But for me, the number 10, the attacking midfielder, the one that can unlock a defence. I think you can have, some quality strikers that we might not have now, depending on how they go this season. I'd still feel like, in some respects, we're going to struggle to unlock a defence. We might end up playing wingers. We might play Daniels and Wally now, and Wally's got a bit of a trick. We don't know much about Daniels, but it seems to me without that 10, you don't give yourself the option of playing both tactics. So for me, I think a quality number 10.
It's not a very sexy choice, but you look at that squad on paper. You sent round one earlier on. I think you tweeted it out. We've only got one left back, and it's Scott Goldborn, who has been in and out on form. When he's fit and he's playing, he's all right, but he's not done enough of it for me. So you've got Scott Goldborn's the only recognised left back, and then in front of him you've got Barnett, Caton, or Daniels, three guys who've never played any real professional football. I mean, the whole left flank needs work, but I think you've got to build it from a solid foundation. So we need a good quality left back, because you can't sort of how do you say it, sort of plaster it up with a right-footed player in there. You need somebody, a specialist.
Couple of points, actually. One, Mike stole my thunder. I was going to say left back as an obvious one. We have one left back. I think the manager's been clear that he was looking to recruit a right back and a left back. So I'm sure we'll see another left back come in, but it's obviously a gap. One thing I would say, we keep talking about this threadbare squad. I was just counting the numbers from the squad that you've been sharing. We've got 24 first-team squad players. That's actually not a small squad. You know, clubs tend to run with smaller squads than that. You could talk about the quality of it, but the numbers is there. I think that if he wants to bring more in, we're probably going to have to see 2 or 3 go out on loan as well before the season starts. The likes of Cameron Gregory, now we've signed this lad today, I'm sure he's going to disappear somewhere, and there'll be 1 or 2 others. Because that's not a small squad. It's just that we've got probably midfielders. There's 8 or 9 of them there, but there's probably too many, but 2 or 3 that aren't going to get games. So let's get them off somewhere else playing so that they're not just hanging around here like a bad penny. But so for me, we can probably look to pare down a little bit, but put the quality where we need it. And left back's definitely a weakness at the moment.
I think that's fair, just to interject, Ollie. What we talked about youth players and hoping they make a breakthrough, but in reality, Ricketts hasn't totally trusted our youth system and tried to bring too many of them through, aside from Sears, as we discussed. So in reality, the likes of Barnett and Roland particularly have got to worry about whether they're actually going to get much of a look in this season. And Chris is right. Potentially they're the ones that we'll see out on loan again at some point. And I think they'd probably be thinking that's possibly likely in the course of the rest of this transfer window, Ollie.
Yeah, I think, but while we've got those numbers, you've got a lot of young kids there, haven't you? You've got 4 or 5, and then you've got Ado, who's obviously played for Telford before now, and Pike, who's a bit of an unknown quantity up front. So yeah, for me, I'm building on what Mike was saying. I think we need a solid left winger if we're going to play this 4-3-3 formation. Someone who's going to cut in. Maybe Worley can play there and cut in and shoot on his right, but love the lad, but his goals to shot ratio is not particularly prolific. So yeah,
no, Ricketts will be left wing back again, Ollie.
But yeah, so we definitely need some quality, and I think we've touched on. So Dan said striker, Glyn said number 10, Mike I said left back, so did Chris. I'm saying left winger. I think probably all those positions probably need to be filled. And the crazy thing is that at the moment we've predicted ourselves mid-low table, like the neutrals have predicted us a bit lower. You add those players to the squad, you've got 4 or 5 new faces in your first team. That completely transforms your squad, and that's the bit that's exciting. Is that as you're saying, Dan, at the start, going to this season doesn't seem that exciting. It's obviously COVID and lockdown and masks and controls and all that kind of stuff. But then you haven't seen a lot of these players, which is going to be fun. Obviously, we haven't really talked about Scott High as well. He's potentially supposed to be quite good as well. He's supposed to have some potential. The right back as well, Marlon Fossey from Fulham, has potentially got some potential. So we don't really know. There's a lot of unknowns about this squad, including the manager, and that's why people have put us in the positions that they have.
Where's Dave Edwards playing this season?
Yeah, they've forgotten. Well, is he going to be our youth team breakthrough prospect?
He's going to he's helping us for the homegrown quota, that's for sure.
Yeah. He is.
But maybe he could be like number 10. Be interesting how we do play. If we do play 2 defensive midfielders, maybe Norburn next to Goss, with Edwards playing a more of an attacking role. The midfielders definitely got some options in there. I'd be interested to see who plays the most. And it's probably going to be like this time last season. We hadn't signed Lang at this point last season. We hadn't signed Cummings, and we hadn't signed Goss. So hopefully we've got some quality coming in soon.
Yeah, Ollie, all I'd add on that is that there's going to be genuine rotation here. I mean, I always used to think rotation, that's what the big boys do with their multi-million-pound superstars. But we have got so much football to cram in we've got a month less to play it. So I think a lot of these guys will get game time. There's no way players can just do the Saturday, Tuesday all the way through. So everyone's going to get a chance if you want to be positive about this. And Ricketts will have the chance to experiment a bit too as we go along. So awful lot of open questions, which is great, no? That's part of the fun of the pre-season discussions that you always have.
Yeah.
It's the shame about missing the games, isn't it, Ollie? Is like we do kind of learn a little bit through pre-season games, I think. Not a lot, and you see it's working out fitness.
Well, Ludlow's still stuck with us all season when poor Brad Walker.
Well, no, that was accurate, though.
It was accurate, yeah. It was accurate, yeah. But you'd get that, and I guess in some ways you can have that double excitement. Well, a couple of beers, some mini cheddars, and the Middlesbrough game on TV on Friday.
Yeah, it's Friday, isn't it? That's the weirdest thing about it. Okay, have we got anything else about the club before we just look at League One, Ollie?
No, nothing else really. If there's any of the comments or any kind of points anyone wants to kind of raise.
The only thing I was thinking about during this conversation is we talk about momentum, and I really agree with Chris. Normally, football momentum is a good thing. Players get in that momentum and win a few games and stuff, and then the crowd get behind them. That's the thing I'm going to be interested to see about how football works this season. I mentioned it on the podcast with Mike Davis. Is with the crowd so spread out and probably quite a bleak sort of quiet noise, it's going to be interesting to see whether those clubs that usually get that momentum and get that sort of fan support from the sides to really push them on to that next level are going to get it this season so much. And we are good, we support our club, but clearly there's an effect at other clubs that sometimes we don't give. So that's the only thing I was thinking of really, that Chris made me think of, is what is the fan reaction and the lack of fans in there is it going to affect some of the ways that some clubs kind of work? I don't know, maybe that's linking too much, but I'm intrigued to see how that affects momentum, I suppose. What about you, Chris? You got your hand up.
I was just saying, yeah, it's an interesting one. I think in some ways that might help us, because I would guess that the Shrewsbury fan base isn't the most patient. I think you go to some places where the fans tolerate a lot more, and our fans maybe turn quite quickly at times. And it might help us actually to have a more of a hardcore base. I suppose the lower crowds that you're going to have in the early weeks are going to be the season ticket holders. They're going to be the types who are hopefully a little bit less likely to turn on their team. I was reading when football restarted for the Premier League, and they were saying, if you look at the results that some of the clubs had, Brighton and Hove Albion did really well once football restarted. And people said part of the reason for that was that Graham Potter's gotten them playing this little tick-tacker style, or whatever you want to call it. And actually, they had the freedom to, without a crowd, they had the freedom to do that. And when they cocked up a little bit, the crowd weren't on their back. So actually, that helped them. And over those weeks, they did really well. And they ended the season with a bit of momentum. Who knows? Maybe that'll be the case for us. I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic again. I'm drinking from my cup of hope.
Dan, you want to say something on that as well, didn't you?
Yeah, it's linked to that really. And statistically, we saw some interesting trends with lockdown football in the top two divisions in England and in Germany as well, where away teams did much better than they would normally do statistically. And I don't think people have really explained that. But one of the ideas is that the pressure of the home fans on the away team, is not there anymore. So the away team can actually just go and play a game of football rather than have to worry about anything else that might be going on. So if that's the case, then the bigger clubs are going to have a deferential impact, because they won't have 30,000 people supporting them. Sunderland. So I'm thinking that could, if those stats actually are causal, then we could be in a slightly better position there, because I think we might have more chance of getting more points away from home.
Where we turned up and looked a bit overawed early on, obviously we got a red card, it's the sort of thing where they won't have to deal with that this season. And you're right, Dan, maybe that is a positive effect. So I don't know what.
Yeah, we're obviously playing Portsmouth away at the start as well, which is a big fan base.
Which will feel like a pre-season friendly, which is a great opportunity for us, Watch us lose 4-0 now.
And I think also there's some of those players, and, one of the things that we have players in our League One who are clearly good footballers, but normally play at our level because they're inconsistent. Maybe good players that are good trainers rather than necessarily good on Saturday. And maybe we might see a few odd performances. We might see players that normally panic and kind of, shoot wide. Maybe with no fans there, they might feel a bit more composed, and that, using that Brighton example, maybe put the ball in the back of the net. So it'd be interesting to see how they get on.
Yeah,
Josh Laurent might score some goals this season.
Well,
I think the telling thing of it is that the technically proficient footballers will be able to shine in less pressured environments. And those teams that trade on physicality and fitness should get taken out of the equation a little bit. So it might be a little bit of a re-leveling of the league a little bit. Some of those direct, the Gillinghams, you think about them, that might not work so well when the pressure's not quite as on the opposition, and they can collect the ball and play a few more passes. So hopefully we're building a passing, technically proficient squad that can make the most of the opportunity, I think.
It's interesting to say that, because actually the teams that play direct football did the best in the playoffs. So Northampton and Wycombe were successful in the playoffs. But I think this is a bit different now, because you've got a longer game. And as Chris said earlier on at the start of the podcast, getting knocked out by Neil Warnock might not be a bad thing, because we have to have less games, a bit more time on the training ground, and that time to recover.
As long as it happens without, if we lose 6-0 or something, that's...
Well, they beat Newcastle 5-1 yesterday. 5-0 or 5-1 in a pre-season friendly. So,
It can't be much. Isn't it last season we lost 4-1 to Rotherham at home in the first round of the Cup? So that was fairly embarrassing. So
that was a horrendous game at home. Yeah, that was
anything less than 4-1 will be an improvement. So let's look forward to Friday night being an improvement on that result anyway.
Probably the team is probably going to do the best. I really think Peterborough are going to do something this year. So I think Peterborough are going to be really, really in the run. I think they'll be doing well. I think Oxford as well are probably going to be on it again. So for me, they're the two teams that I probably expect to be near the top of the division.
I hope not with Peterborough after everything that's gone on and
Really,
the nonsense
Glenn?
they made with
you were a
made
fan.
with us.
I've misread this one then.
Shocked.
Made
I tell
with
you.
us and cancelling that game last year. Yeah, we can't have Peterborough doing well. They've got £10 million in the bank. That's fine. They can just sit on that for a few years and they haven't got to worry about COVID for a while, have they? I suppose. But I don't know really, Ollie. I mean, yeah, you look at who's in our league. It's hard to predict some of the dark horses. I always look at a club like Burton, who kind of occasionally go on one of these good seasons and they get up into the Championship and they seem to get the job done. Might be whether you can consider them dark horses because they've been in the Championship more recently, I suppose. But sometimes I think that they're the sort of team that just seems to get on that good run and kind of get out of the division. So based on nothing other than history, really, because we don't know too much about these teams. We don't know what they've done pre-season other than the results. We don't know too much about what formations they're going to play. I'll go for Burton, Ollie.
I reckon it's difficult to call because the teams change so much year in year. I mean, we're likely to be, a pretty different outfit to what we were in March, when all the transfers come through. So, I mean, trying to set and guess in any sort of meaningful way is a nightmare. I mean, the big clubs, obviously, you keep an eye on and you expect them with their money to do well. But and I don't know if I'm making these stats up, to be honest, but I've got this thing that teams do go through from League Two to the Championship, or certainly in years gone by it's happened. And so I'm looking at some of the sides who came up, and I'm thinking someone like Swindon, right? Now, evidential base, a bit flimsy on my part, but
they have lost their main striker, but yeah.
All right, okay. Well, this doesn't have to go out then. No, I'll stick with it now. I've said it. One of the promoted teams, I think, is likely to do pretty well and be a dark horse here because they will have a degree of momentum. And I think all it takes is a good first 10 games and you can suddenly find yourself doing a Wickham. So I've said Swindon, but I'll look for all the promoted teams. I think one of them is going to do quite well.
Mike, I can see you're looking at the Football League table.
I am. I will go on record now to.
Well, let's give Mike a bit of time then. What Chris?
I'm very much not a football pervert. So my knowledge of the opposition teams occurs between 3 and 5 on a Saturday when I work out who we're playing. I watch the match and then I go home. So I don't know. I just say like Burton because they're quite a nice club, aren't they? Let's just say Burton. Why not? It's very nice. No, I just hope that it's not like I was looking through the league table. Then there's quite a lot of dislikable clubs in our league. Fleetwood, MK Dons, Sunderland, Hull, Wigan. There's a lot of people I would like to do badly. So I just hope it's not one of those teams that come and turn up and think they're a big time Charlie and take the piss. Like
it doesn't work, does it?
Nah,
it just doesn't work in this league.
Yeah, hopefully they all go bust and bankrupt and the salary cap damages them all. And we rise to the top by accident and we win the league on a technicality. That's what I'm looking
default.
For. Yeah, that's it.
But you mentioned Fleetwood there, Mike. That's not a bad call. Year in, year out. Joey Barton, everybody's favourite, Joey Barton. But there's something about Fleetwood.
I thought if I read out every team name, eventually I'll get it right.
Go on, Chris. Have you got any more method behind your pick than just looking at the league table now?
2 to mention for me. So I'm with Ollie. This year, I think Peterborough are going to get it right. I think they've lost Ivan Toney, and I think Johnson Clark-Harris is a genius piece of business by them to replace him. He'll come in and score a lot of goals for them, and I have a feeling this is the year they'll click. If you're asking for a dark horse, I'm going to say Blackpool. I've looked at recruitment in the last few weeks, and I think that Neil Critchley, their manager's recruited well. They finished last season fairly well. They look stronger to me. I've got a feeling that they'll be up there.
Yeah, I think Blackpool's a great shout for a dark horse. And Glyn, what you said Burton, and who knows?
I
think on that point, I think it's really exciting in that sense that if you're a Burton fan, you're even an Accrington Stanley fan, you're a Shrewsbury Town fan. This season is balmy. We've had COVID, we've got salary caps. It's really thrown it's really kind of mixed things up. Gillingham have got probably a really good chance as well of pushing on. They seem to have done some good recruitment. I think it's one of those seasons where if you're in the mix, if you're not too far away at Christmas, I think you've got the chance to dream and dare to dream because there's going to be some surprises. Last season, Wickham were a surprise. And I reckon there'll be some big surprises this year as well because it's such a crazy year.
I agree with Mike and you to some respects. I'd like to see a big surprise down the other way. I'd love to see an Ipswich or a Hull just getting a huge amount of trouble and not be able to recover from it, just because I like that mixing the leagues up. I like some of these bigger clubs to just have a total fall from grace, to kind of just mix the leagues up and make it so that other teams can, as you just said, Ollie, dream to be a little bit higher because some clubs are falling on bad times. I know that seems really horrible, but I'm fairly clear on this podcast. I'm an utterly bitter football fan, so I might as well continue in that vein during this one. But yeah, it'd be nice to see someone getting a bit of trouble they can't get out of.
One club I think is going to struggle this year, Lincoln. I think Lincoln have had a phenomenal 5 years, and I think these 5-year cycles are 5-year cycles, and I think ultimately they were struggling at the end of the season. Only had 10 players on their books by the time COVID hit, because that's to release them to make ends meet. And I've just got a feeling that Lincoln, we might be seeing the end of that phenomenal cycle when they went up 2 divisions. One meaningless cup finals, which we won't talk about. And so, yeah, Lincoln, that's my prediction for coming bottom. If anybody else wants to join me in predicting who's going to come bottom.
No, I'll take that. I'll take that all day.
It's a good point, actually. Bottom of the table is going to be weird because you've got Charlton, obviously, who are unknown if they're going to have an owner or not. You've got Wigan, who have got their problems as well. And, we've seen clubs, haven't we? Portsmouth, we've seen Bradford. Seen teams do drop down the divisions. You used to have a bit of a mare. So, yeah, it's going to be a fascinating season. And, yeah, it's. I think it's one where the bookies might have made some bad choices because, there is going to be some teams that are going to do well, and some fans hopefully will prosper.
Be interesting. It will be a fascinating season, and it's going to be struggling to watch most of it on the bloody streams away from home, and then trying to get to the home games. It's going to be different for us on the podcast. I suppose we'll wrap this one up now, but we will be doing usual Sunday night podcasts. It will obviously be reflecting some of the stuff we've seen rather than physically being out, which is a shame, but all podcasts covering football clubs are doing the same thing at the moment. We can keep asking for a press pass at the football club. We ain't ever going to get one, but it doesn't stop us knocking on the door occasionally. But yeah, we'll try and bring the usual podcasts and get the 3 guys who, thanks for joining us tonight, get them back on it at some point in the season to talk about what we've actually seen and whether that matches up to what we talked about tonight.
Yep, brilliant. So yeah, thanks guys for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Cheers, fellas.
Rob, thanks for having us.
Thanks as always.
Cheers, guys. Yeah, well, so we'll be back on Sunday, I guess, probably, to discuss the Borough game. And yeah, hopefully iFollow will work. He did have that test with all the championship teams. My mate, one of the guys who works for me, Phil, is a Borough fan, and he said it worked fine after the second game. So fingers crossed it works. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Share with us your thoughts. And yeah, it's going to be weird getting back to podcasts every Sunday, Glyn. It's been a while.
It is. I've enjoyed a bit of a break from football and podcasts in general. Just having a nice, lockdown summer holiday away from it. I know we did a lot of stuff at the start of lockdown, but I'm refreshed, ready to attack this season, Ollie, with some vigour.
And ready to moan about lack of goals and
ready to see
referee
what Brad
mistakes.
Exactly. So yes, we'll be back on Sunday and looking forward to it.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, fellas.
Good stuff.
Cheers.